A large portion of the Jewish nation has returned to its homeland, but the heart, soul, and mind of much of the Jewish nation are still in exile mode. This state of affairs must and will inevitably change. This is Torah Nation TV from Jerusalem, and we are speaking with the head of Machon Shilo, Rabbi David Bar-Hayim. Shalom, Rabbi Bar-Hayim.
Shalom.
Does Seudah Shlishith need to be eaten at a particular time of day? And does it matter whether one eats Seudah Shlishith before or after davening Mincha?
We find in Masechet Shabbath in the Talmud Bavli, Dov Kof Yod Zayin Amud Bet 117b, that a person must eat Shalosh Seudot, 3 meals during the course of the Shabbath. But no particular time is mentioned for these meals. In fact, in the commentary of Rabbeinu Hananel on the Gemara there, we find that he speaks about the halacha being 3 meals during the Shabbath, 1 at night and 2 during the day, Shnaim Bayom. Those are his words. And that language of Rabbeinu Hananel could be understood to mean that as long as one eats 2 meals during the course of the day, one has fulfilled the mitzvah of eating 3 meals on Shabbat. There is no particular time frame for the third meal. One assumes that the second meal would have to be in the morning after one davens. But as for the third meal, one doesn't find any time frame mentioned, neither in the Gemara nor in Rabbeinu Hananel. However, in the Rambam, Ilchot Shabbat Perek Lamed, Halakha Treth, we find as follows: Hayav Adam le'echol shalosh sudot b'Shabbat. A person must eat 3 meals during the course of the Shabbat. Ahath arvith, 1 at night, wa ahath shaharith, wa ahath b'mincha, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. Now, to be more precise, I translated the word mincha as afternoon, but Rambam himself, in his Perush on the Mishnah, in Masechet Berachot Perek Dalet, explains that the word mincha, when not qualified, refers to a particular time of the day. That is to say, not just the afternoon in the generic sense, but from 9.5 hours of the day till the end of the day. That is to say, if we speak of a hypothetical day from 6 to 6 o'clock in the morning being sunrise and 6 in the evening being sunset, and the 12 hours of the day, each of those hours is a sha'az zamanith, also an halachic hour, which is the 12th of the day, then 9.5 hours means from 3:30 in the afternoon until 12 hours, which is 6 o'clock in the evening. And that period of time is referred to as minha, or ham minha, the time of the minha. And one should also keep in mind here the fact that we have a Mishnah in Masechet Shabbath on Daf Teth, which speaks about not eating before a meal, before davening mincha, any day of the year, not just on Shabbath. And there the Gemara, the words of the Mishnah are samuch la mincha, before, or in the immediate time, half an hour or so before that time called mincha, one is not to eat a meal unless one has already davened mincha. And the Gemara gives 2 options, ways of understanding this Mishnah. One, that it's referring to what we call mincha gedolah, which is from 6.5 hours, that is to say half an hour after midday. And from that time onwards, one is not allowed to eat a meal unless one has first davened mincha. And the other Perush, the other option, is to understand that it refers to, as the Rambam said in his Perush on the Mishnah, that it refers to the usual concept, the time known as mincha, which is 9.5 hours. Therefore, samuch le mincha of that Mishnah refers to 9 hours, that is to say 3 p.m. on that hypothetical day. And from 3 p.m. one is not allowed to eat a meal unless one has first davened mincha. And this applies every day of the year, and therefore it applies also on Shabbat. So, according to the view of those, such as Rambam, who hold that one is not allowed to eat a meal before having davened mincha from 6.5 hours onwards, from mincha gedolah onwards, then this would apply on Shabbat, and that also means that one could not eat Seudah Shlishith from that time, from half an hour after midday until one has first davened mincha. And that also therefore makes a certain connection between the davening of mincha and the eating of the meal, not because of an intrinsic connection between the concept, the fact of having davened mincha and the mitzvah of eating the third meal on Shabbat, but because of the fact that one is not to eat a meal before having davened mincha any day of the year, in order that one should not get carried away and forget that one hasn't davened mincha, and the meal will stretch out, etc., and thus one will miss davening mincha on that day. So, according to those who hold like Rambam, that one may not eat a meal before having davened mincha from 6.5 hours of the day, which is shortly after midday, this basically precludes the option of eating the third meal of the day before davening mincha. Whereas, according to the other opinion, which is the view of Rabbeinu Tam and the Bala Ma'or, and I would venture to say this is the pshat of the Mishnah, wherever the word mincha is mentioned is, as the Rambam himself claims in his Perush on the Mishnah and Barachot, the simple meaning is always from 9.5 hours onwards. Therefore, there is no reason, for example, not to eat Sudah Shalishith, shall we say, again on that hypothetical day at, shall we say, 1:30 or 2 p.m. Or something like that, and then davening mincha after the time of mincha ktana, after 9.5 hours, which is anyhow the preferable and more correct time for davening mincha every day of the year. So, according to that, there does not have to be a connection between davening mincha and eating Sudah Shlishith. And all of this is also connected to another question, and that is, as we said at the beginning, is there in fact any time frame for these meals? Because Chazal do not say so explicitly. Rambam, in his wording of this halakha that we just read, where he spoke about 3 meals, one in the evening, one in the morning, b'shaharit, and one b'minha in the latter part of the afternoon, it seems that the Rambam holds that each of these meals does have a particular time frame, even perhaps without any connection to the concept of having daven mincha and the prohibition of eating a meal before having daven mincha. And there are certain poskim who understood it in this fashion. And the Torah also understands this halakha in this fashion, although he doesn't mention 9.5 hours, he speaks of 6.5 hours. In other words, according to the Torah and other Rishonim, there is a time frame for eating Sudah Shalishith, which is from 6.5 hours onwards on any given Shabbat, according to the length of the day. So, on the hypothetical day of 6 to 6, from 12:30 onwards, one may eat Sudah Shalishith, but not before. On the other hand, we find in the Halachot Gedolot a very interesting statement, and I will read it to you. This is in Halachot Gedolot, in Chot Shabbath, Perek Shisha Asar, the 16th chapter, and he writes as follows: that one has to eat 3 meals on Shabbat. He says, "V'lo lemechal v'ihfuneh or v'istekuneh." There's a word here which is unclear, but his meaning is that one has to eat 3 meals, but one does not have to do it in such a manner where it is very difficult or impossible to do. He means to say one can perform the mitzvah of eating shalosh sudoth, even though the meal is not yet over. The implication here is that he's speaking of the second meal, which is usually in the first half of the day, in the morning. What one can do, he says, is paris mapa umavarech. One can stop the meal in the middle. In other words, after the first course or the second course, cover the table with a tablecloth or something like that, or remove some of the items from the table. Say birkat hamazon, and then lift the tablecloth that was placed over the food over the table, or return some of the foodstuffs to the table. Say hamosi again, and then one can eat if one wants only to eat another egg's worth, he says, in other words, a small amount of bread. That's sufficient to perform the mitzvah of shalosh seudoth. This statement of the Halachot Gedolot, which is a very ancient and authoritative halachic source, is very interesting and is quoted later by a number of Rishonim, including the Tur, who mentions that his father, the Rosh, used to do something similar. And I will quote from the Tur. In Siman Resh Sadeh Aleph, the Tur writes, Uzmana, the time for eating this third meal, Mishe higia zemana minha, dahainu mishesh sha'oth u'mehesa u'lema'ala u'lo kodem. The time for eating this meal is from 6.5 hours of the day onwards, so again on the hypothetical day of 6 to 6, from 12:30 onwards. And then he goes on to say, Hilchach, and therefore, Otham shemafsikim besudat shaharith, those whose practice it is, in order to fit in 3 meals into the day, they stop in the middle of their second meal in the morning. One assumes we're talking about the second half of the morning after having gone to shul, etc. So we're talking about late in the morning, close to midday. they have the practice of lahalka, to break the meal into two, to divide it into two. وَعَذَيْن لَا هِجِيَ زْمَنَ مِنْخَا, and they do this before the time of mincha, this time he just stipulated, 6.5 hours, has come around. אינם מקיימים מצוות 3 סעודות. They are not performing the mitzvah of 3 סעודות. אבל, however, אם הגיע זמן המנחה, in other words, if the time of 6.5 hours has arrived, יכולים לעשותה מיד, then they can do so. אחר סעודה שחרית, you can have the third meal immediately after the second meal. It seems that the Tur and certain other poskim express themselves in this fashion in order to disagree with what they understood the halachot and gedolot to be implying, namely that one can eat the third meal even before midday or before the time of mincha has come around. And that is possibly what the halachot gedolot in fact had in mind. It's very possible he had this in mind, although it's not absolutely explicit in his words. And some Rishonim disagreed. But the Tur we see, and the Tosafot and others agree that after 6.5 hours of the day, that is to say shortly after midday, one can eat the third meal, even if it's right on the heels of the second meal. And this implies clearly that one may do so without having first davened mincha. And this also fits with the Perush, with the Psak Halacha of the Tosafot and the Rosh and Rabbeinu Tam and many other Rishonim, that the halacha about not eating a meal before davening mincha applies only from a half an hour before mincha ktanah, from 9 hours onwards. So if we're talking about 6.5, 7 hours of the day, 8 hours of the day, there's no reason whatever not to eat a meal at that time. Then the Tur goes on to say, and he quotes here the practice of his father, the Rosh, and he says, "V'chen haya oseh adoni avi Rosh." This was the custom of my father, the Rosh. Haya mevarech birkat hamazon. Sometimes he would eat the first meal of the day, that is to say, during the day, the second meal of Shabbath. He would say birkat hamazon after it. V'haya notel yado, and then he would wash his hands again. Umevarech alehem, umevarech hamosi, and would say hamosi again. And then would eat some more, and then that would be his third meal. And he was accustomed to say that it is better to do so. If the meal of the morning, the second meal, schleps out to the point where it is already 6.5 hours of the day have passed, then it is better to do so because if he were not to do so, he would not be able to eat later. In other words, he would feel too full, he would feel uncomfortable, or it would get in the way of his learning perhaps, or having a rest, and he would only be able to eat achila gasa. In other words, he would have to force himself to eat, and this is not something that he thought was correct, to turn the Suda Shlishith into something which is unpleasant or undesirable, and therefore it is better to stop the meal if the meal has already gone to that point beyond midday, a half an hour after midday on Shabbath, to stop the meal, say birkat hamazon, and then immediately say Amotzi again and eat some more, and thus perform the mitzvah of 3 sudot. This was also the practice of the Rosh, we see. And clearly this was being done without davening mincha first. So we see, first of all, with reference to the question about does one have to daven mincha before Seudah Shlishith, we see from these sources that no, one does not need to do so. There is no intrinsic connection between davening mincha and eating Seudah Shlishith. The only possible connection is the fact that according to some of the poskim, like the Rambam, one must never eat a meal, not on Shabbat, not any other day, from 6.5 hours of the day onwards, that is to say shortly after midday, if one has not first done mincha. So therefore, according to the Rambam, one would not be able to do what the Rosh, for example, was accustomed to do. But according to many poskim, this is perfectly acceptable. And this practice is also mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Sadi Aleph as being a good idea in many situations. We all know that in many communities, in many homes, for different reasons, the fact of the matter is that the second meal is eaten quite late during the day, and the end result of all this is that the third meal is basically forgotten about. And therefore, in such a situation, it is clearly preferable to go according to to follow the view of the Tosafot and the Tur and the Rosh, to make a break in the second meal at some point after 6.5 hours at least, and say Birkat HaMazon, and then start again and say Al-Musi and eat some more, and that will be the third meal, and thus one performs the third meal. And even though this may not be according to all the Posekim, we do have the concept in Masechet Avodah Zarah, Daf Zayin, that בדבר של תורה הלוך אחר המחמיר, בשל סופרים הלוך אחר המקל. In other words, b'shel Torah, if we're talking about a Torah issue and something which is rooted explicitly in the Torah, then one does not know if the halacha is according to this view or that view, then one should follow the more stringent view. But if we're talking about something which is midivrei sofarim, b'shel sofarim, something which is midirabanan, as Suda Shlishit is, and it's not clear to us if the halacha is like this or that opinion, then we are at liberty to follow the more lenient opinion. So in order to perform the mitzvah of shalosh sodot, it is a good idea to follow that practice of breaking the meal into two. And according to the halachot gedolot, it seems that one can actually do so even before the time for mincha comes around, even before midday. And in fact, rationally, I cannot see a reason why this would not be acceptable, and I can think of many reasons why a person might want to do so. Imagine, for example, a person who gets up early in the morning, perhaps he davens kawathikin with the sunrise, or even or a little bit later, and let's say he gets home after having davened on Shabbath at, for example, 8 o'clock, or even 7:30, or could be a bit earlier, a bit later, and he wishes to eat his first meal. And he also perhaps, as the Torah himself and other Posakim write, that Chacham Eino Barosho will not fill himself to the brim at the second meal, so as to leave room for the third meal. So he eats his second meal in the early part of the morning because he's already davened and he got up early, he's hungry, and then he maybe takes a break for an hour or two, perhaps he learns, or what have you. And then perhaps he wishes to eat, if he ate at 8, perhaps, let's say he's finished at 9:30, 10 o'clock perhaps, and then he feels like eating again at, for example, 11:30 or 12 or something like that, and or could even be a bit earlier, at 11 o'clock, and eat the third meal, that is to say the second meal during the day. And with that he has completed the 3 meals, and after that this person may want to go to the Beit Midrash and learn from, let's say, 12:30, 1 o'clock till the time for Mincha, and daven Mincha, and stay in the Beit Knesset, stay in the Beit Midrash till Arvith. He has a chevruta, he has a shiur, or what have you, or may want to rest in the afternoon and not have to get up to have the third meal. I do not really see any cogent argument why one could not do so, and this seems to be the opinion of the halachot gedolot. But as we mentioned, there are posakim who disagree with this position, and they claim that the Suda Shalishit must be eaten after 6.5 hours of the day. But that too leaves us many options for organizing our day in such a way that we are able to eat shalosh sudot and to learn and to study and to and daven at a proper time, etc. And there's no real reason at all to treat the concept of the third meal lightly and to ignore it, as unfortunately is done in many places. There is no excuse for so doing. And this is a chovah, and as we saw, there are many ways of performing the mitzvah correctly.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.